knew that he had wanted the meeting, and that it was the palace side who had stopped it from happening.
The palace side, or do you think it was the king himself? I mean, because I remember Harry. We both read Spare, and we both seen all the documentaries he's done. He's not pulled punches about the people that were around the late Queen, or he had nicknames for certain private secretaries, and he was less than complimentary by people in the royal household. Do you think it was the royal household that kept them apart, or is it the king's choice that he didn't want to see his son?
I think ultimately, if the king had wanted to see Harry, the king would have seen Harry. I mean, I'm sure that Harry probably had some time dealing with the staff who we know that he hates, and that was probably a difficult and frustrating experience for him that he didn't enjoy. But I think if the king had wanted to meet Harry, the king would have met Harry.
Yeah.
And, honestly, it's sad. Like, I completely understand that there's a lot of anger towards Harry, and I understand why. And not just within the royal family, but also publicly. He's not a hugely popular man in Britain anymore. But I think one thing that the royals, that Charles and William, should take really seriously is the framing for this visit was the military and veterans. Harry was here to celebrate a project that was launched as a royal project. It was launched while he was a working royal family member. As you've said, Charles and William, they all showed out to support it back in 2014. It's a fantastic project. You've got the government were represented. Johnny Mercer turned out to support Harry. In fact, on the Tuesday, he was at a conference with Harry. So if the government, Conservative government, they're going to be pro-monarchy voters, and probably a lot of Conservative voters don't like Harry very much. But if Johnny Mercer can see, as Veterans Minister, that the project shines brighter than people's feelings about Harry, then the royals should be able to see that too.
Well, let's talk about that Invictus ceremony a little bit. I was there. I was very lucky enough I was quite high up in the seats. I had to bring binoculars to see what was going on.
Opera glasses. Did you have the opera glasses?
I didn't. I had binoculars because you're quite the press are quite a long way away from the actual ceremony. And it was clear that no members of the royal family would turn up, as we were talking about earlier. But there were a lot of people there. We had Mark Dyer, which are an old friend of Harry's.
Major figure in Harry's life. Yeah,
major figure in Harry's life. I think Jamie Lava Pinkerton, his former mentor, was also there, and he was surrounded by people who like him. One of the most provocative, possibly, that's my word, provocative, guest would have been Earl Spencer, which is Princess Diana's brother.
Yeah.
Now, he famously, at Diana's funeral, with a very strongly worded speech, an address that got a round of applause from people outside Westminster Abbey, talked about blood family and blood relatives and looking after William and Harry. He doesn't get on with King Charles, but he was there with Diana's sister and some cousins to support Harry. What do you make of that? Is it in a kind of PR opportunity, but also, to show family relations? What do you make of that show of support from Diana's family?
Yeah, it reignites the framing that existed in the 1990s, which is basically, so you mentioned Charles Spencer's speech at Diana's funeral. He said, we, Diana's blood family, will raise these two boys up so that they are not caged by duty, but can be free to become the well-rounded people you wanted them to be. It was an incredibly powerful moment, but it was also, all the royals were sat there, including the Queen, listening to him say this, and it was a very explicit attack on them. Obviously there's some bad blood in the history between the two Charleses, but also, the allegation against the monarchy back in those days after Princess Diana died was emotional indifference. There was also this whole thing about whether they were going to come down from Balmoral, whether they were going to see floral tributes. It was all like, the headline in The Sun, I think, was, "Where is our Queen? Where is her flag?" What Harry's done here, what Harry's been able to do is, the Spencers turned out to show him love and warmth and to show him respect for this project at his big moment. It's a big thing to have your project recognised at St Paul's Cathedral with a service of thanksgiving with all these people in attendance, Damian Lewis reading a poem, brilliant actor. And the Spencers were there and Charles wasn't and William wasn't. And it's back to that framing of the royals are emotionally indifferent and the warmth comes from Diana's side of the family. And so, this is the strange thing about Harry, is that he has done some things that have made people very angry with him, throwing hand grenades at his family, criticising people, spilling royal secrets in this book. But the better he behaves, the more the criticism shifts off him and it risks passing on to the royals. So when he actually behaves himself and does things the way he's supposed to do them, doesn't criticise people and doesn't throw hand grenades, certain underlying tensions bubble to the surface, like often actually related to his military career and his war record. It was the same thing with whether he was going to wear his military uniform to support Queen Elizabeth II in the run-up to her funeral. And the monarchy started taking some serious criticism over the fact that he wasn't going to be allowed to. And back in those days, he did it right. He wasn't criticising anybody. He played the game. You know, he turned up with William and Kate to do the job in Windsor. And when he behaves himself, that is when the monarchy is actually at its most vulnerable. And that really is what has happened here. Is I think that Charles and William maybe did not realise that the greatest threat to them is actually Harry behaving himself.
So we often look at this through, you know, a journalistic kind of media bubble, through our lens, and work out, you know, who maybe has won the PR war here.
Yeah.
But look, Charles's diary was busy. I understand why the king is utterly furious with Harry.
Of course.
All right. I
absolutely.
mean, you know, let's get to the bottom. You mentioned about hand grenades and insults and stuff like that. The trashing of the family, you know, has been dreadful. The PR that Harry has failed in the last couple of years, and now you're suggesting that he's behaving himself. You're right, both him and the Duchess of Sussex have kind of detoxified themselves.
Yeah.
They haven't been criticising anyone, but there is a danger that you're pointing out there that public sentiment could shift. But I think there's so much water under the bridge that I think many people still feel incredibly bitter.
Towards Harry.
Towards Harry.
Of course they do, absolutely, and they will for a long time. It'll be years before people forget. Harry and Meghan, you know, disliked by around about 2/3 of Britain, I think. And Harry used to be liked by 80% of Britain, and Meghan as well. She was liked by 55% of Britain right up until the moment they quit. You know, through that whole year in 2019, when they say that they were pilloried by the British press. The British public actually loved her. At the point that they announced their engagement, which was November 2017, Meghan was liked by 55% of Brits. In November 2019, when they quit, right before they quit, the last polling before they quit in the January of 2020, she was liked by 55% of Brits. So they maintained their popularity through their whole royal career. The point at which it started to go downhill was first when they quit, then when they did Oprah. And obviously Spare also made people very angry with them. But one of the ways that the royal family weathered that storm and came out predominantly on top, winning the PR war of those big kind of bombshell interviews, was that they didn't fight back. And it's very unseemly and uncomfortable for the public to watch a person repeatedly attack his own family in a context where they aren't fighting back. But the one thing that the royal should be slightly cautious of is if Harry now looks like he's the warm one and he's playing ball and he wants peace. The public overwhelmingly predominantly want to see peace reign. You know, they don't want the war to continue. And if it looks like Harry is a partner for peace, but Charles is shunning him and snubbing him, there is a risk that it flips and it looks like Harry is the one who's not fighting back. And that is actually where the risk to them lies.